Well, good morning. How y'all doing? Good? Excellent, excellent. Hey, last weekend, as Mike said, so much fun at the Capitol. It's very hard to get an exact count. We think we had somewhere between 1,500 and 1,600 people at the Capitol with kids and everything, so it was very fun. More significantly, we had over 50 people pray to receive Christ for the first time last week, so that was awesome. It is such a privilege to do life with you guys. I mean, I love my church because, we are the church, all of us together, and you guys take so seriously the mission that God has given us, and I just love it. So thanks for that we get to do this together. Also, Barry Clark won the gift pack of cards. We baited you or bribed you to fill out your Connect card last week, and so Barry Clark won 6 $50 gift cards to the Highlands. Saw Barry this morning. I think at the end of this brave experience that we're going to go through over the next 6 weeks, Barry's going to be a much larger man. So I'm just saying. So that's that. Well, hey, we are kicking off a brand new sermon series this week called Brave, and I am fired up about this sermon series. I think this sermon series has the potential, if you will engage, to change your life, and I don't say that lightly. Everybody goes, it's going to change your life. No. If you will actually do what we're talking about over the next 6 weeks, it could change your life. But not just your life, but our community and our church as well. And the reason we're talking about Brave is because fear is what holds us back. Fear holds us back from doing the things we know we ought to do, or the things that are rattling around in our soul, or the things that God is calling us to do. If you're a follower of Jesus, most likely there's something rattling around inside your inner world, and you just kind of know there's something you need to tend to. There's a direction you need to go in, and you haven't done it. And you keep kicking it down the road, and you keep kind of ignoring what God is saying to you because of fear. Fear holds us back. And fear is a phenomenon in our culture. We look over the last 30 years, and if you look at the statistics on fear and anxiety, it has gone up exponentially, up and to the right. We can look at medication rates. We can look at just studies that have been done. Anxiety and fear is a huge deal in our culture, and it's growing. It's not slowing down. As we sort through prayer requests, we put them into categories, and one of the biggest categories, if not the largest category every week, is fear and anxiety. This is real. This is where we live. And the problem with that is that God's best for you is on the other side of your fear. God has something for you. He has something that he wants you to do. That's, I think, maybe why I'm most excited about this series, is because this is about doing what we're talking about. And there's something, I believe, that God wants you to do, and most of us might even know what it is. Some of us might not yet. If you're not a follower of Jesus, it's just that thing rattling around inside of you, that business idea or whatever that, okay, well, let's go with that for now. But if you are a follower of Jesus, we use the language that God is prompting us, calling us, something along those lines. And the truth is, every one of us was made for adventure. You were made for adventure. Now, we don't necessarily like adventure. We like comfort, right? Comfort is the god of our age. And adventure calls us out of our comfort zone. But what happens when we stay in our comfort zone is we begin to die a very slow death. If you're going to grow spiritually, you got to do some new things. You got to face down your fears and go beyond them, and you're going to find breakthrough on the other side. Growth is tied to how many new things you do. You don't grow by doing the same old things over and over and over again. You grow by doing new things. You can improve on the old things, but the breakthroughs in our lives come when we do new things, and that's tied directly to your bravery quotient. You have an intelligence quotient and an IQ. You have a BQ as well. And so I like big BQs. I cannot lie. And so we're going to do what we can. Unlike IQ, you can't really raise your IQ. You can raise your BQ. And we're going to lean into that over the next 6 weeks as we go through this series. And what I want to invite you to do is to find your direction, find your heading, where you're going. What is that thing? And that's what this week is all about. Not just this week in the service, but this week as we go into this week, I'm going to give you some homework to do. And as you you do, I want you to discern. I want you to find some quiet time and sit and listen. Maybe go to the park or some quiet time at home and just say, God, I'm listening. And invite him to speak to you. And maybe he'll whisper something in your heart or your mind or show you something or give you a picture or whatever. And I want you to write down what that is. And we'll talk more of the specifics of that later in the message. But you need a heading. You need a vision of where you're going. In Proverbs 29, verse 18, it says, where there is no vision, the people perish. Where there is no vision, the people perish. And it's not talking about kind of people run off cliffs where there is no vision. This is a long, slow death of our soul. We just kind of stagnate when there's no vision, when we don't know where we're going. Stephen Covey in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People said, begin with the end in mind. So as we prepare to go through this next 6 weeks, I want you to have a heading, a direction. What is that thing God is calling you to do or that has been rattling around inside of you? And I want you to name it, all right? And we're going to go for it. And for some of us, it might be big things, might be big life-changing things that are going to go well beyond this 6 weeks. And for some of us, it might just be just a little thing that we're going to do for 6 weeks. It's just something that we're going to, but whatever it is, write it down, all right? That's the big idea this week. Because many of us are living without vision, and many of us are dying spiritually. We're stagnating. And we're going to see if we can turn that around. Now, as an outdoor guy, I know something about maps and compasses. And so this is a map of the Appalachian Trail along the North Carolina-Tennessee border. Not that it matters. We're going to pretend it's a map of where we are. All right, but when you go orienteering, which is using a map and compass to get around, typically what you do is you take the map and you orient it to the environment that you're in. So you learn to read the contour lines and you can see that, well, that's a mountain over there and a valley over there, and you can kind of find it on the map, and you're standing on a little knoll, and you sit the map down on the ground and you orient it to the environment that you're in. Once it's oriented to the environment you're in, you take the compass, right? And you line the compass up from the point that you're on to the point that you're going to. So you know where you're going. You can see a picture of it on the map. You might not even be able to see it in the distance because it might be over the next mountain, but you can see on the map, you can see where you're going. And you sit this down and you put the back part of the compass on where you are and the front part of the compass heading towards where you're going. And then you have a north-south arrow, right? And so there's a little box that you line up on the north arrow, and then when you pull it up, that's your heading, right? So at that point, what I can do now is I can put the map away. I have OCD, so I have to do this neatly. I can put the map away, but I can pull out my compass, right? And I know that I'm heading east. And so at any point in my journey, as long as I can see the next thing that I'm shooting for, and it lines up with my heading, I'm good to go. And it will get me through the obstacles, through the storms, through the difficulties that I will face. It will give me a picture of where I'm going ultimately. It makes all the difference in the world. Because without that, you're just going to meander through life. So this is really important. So we're going to find our heading this week. And so for you, it might be a really big, bold step. Maybe there's an addiction you need to kick. And you've been playing around with it, and you've been putting your toe in the water of recovery, but you've not jumped all in. You've not gotten that picture lined up and that heading done, and you've not given it everything you got. And maybe that's your heading for this journey. For some of us, it might be a career change. You know what you're doing isn't what you're supposed to be doing, and you're doing it, and you keep doing it, and it's time to make a change. That would be a pretty bold change, a pretty bold heading. Some of us need to start something. Some of us have a ministry inside of us that's an idea that that's what I need to do that. Some of us need to start a business. There's a business idea rattling around inside of you. Maybe God gave it to you, and it's like, well, but if I do that, then, I could lose this, and I don't know. Some of us are being called into ministry. Well, that's a scary one. Yeah, well, maybe that's your heading. Maybe that's your heading. Some of us have a relationship heading we need to set. Maybe there's a relationship, maybe it's a parent or a sibling or somebody that you work with, a relationship that's out of kilter, and you know, I got to make that right. But it's scary, because what if they don't respond well when you talk to them? What if it gets ugly? What if it blows up? And it's just kind of a scary thing. You're going to have to find your brave to push through the fear to get to the other side. But you know that's just kind of in you, or God has been speaking that to you over time. Some of us need to build into our marriages. Like if you got really honest, you would have to, if you're married, and you've been married for a while, and you're like, you know what? Our marriage is not as good as it needs to be. Some of the passion is gone. And in order to fix that, you have to acknowledge it, and that is scary. You're going to have to find some brave. You're going to have a real conversation with your spouse. You're going to have to set a direction and start doing some things, maybe going on the marriage retreat here in a couple weeks, or reading a book together, or start praying together, whatever it is, whatever that heading is for you. But until you're willing to acknowledge and face the fear of the reality that you're in, you're not going to be able to change what's going on in your marriage, or maybe your kids. You know, I've been looking at the statistics of how much time we spend on our phones and in front of screens and all of that. Kids spend like 40 hours a week in front of their screens. It's a full-time job. And they spend less than 1 hour a week with their parents. I mean, and they're in the same room, but having conversation, building a relationship. What do you think is influencing your kids more, you or something else? You know that radio commercial about not texting and driving? Put down the phone. You don't know it, so I thought it was funny. But anyway, so we got all these people from Southern West Virginia yelling, put down the phone. Anyway, put down the phone. Maybe you need to put down the phone. Maybe your heading is, I'm going to build a friendship with my kids, so when they're gone, it's going to be a blink of an eye. There's a depth and a foundation, and we're going to make some radical decisions about what we're going to do as far as spending time together. Maybe that's your heading. I don't know. Some of us need to make a personal change. Maybe you need to start eating right. I don't know, that doesn't seem all that spiritual, but it is. It's all tied together. We need to start exercising. Need to go back to school. Need to get your finances under control. That's a scary one, because you have to sit down and look at your current reality. If you're married, you have to have that conversation with your spouse, like, we're out of control. That's scary. How's that going to go? Is it going to work out? But the breakthrough that you're looking for is on the other side of that conversation. But you're going to have to find your brave to get from here to there. Financial peace is possible, but it's scary, right? Getting from here to there. It's a new thing. New things tend to be scary. Some of us need to make a difference with our lives, and we know we're being called to maybe into ministry, or to start a ministry, or to volunteer and get involved in serving other people. Whatever it is for you, these are just some ideas. This is not the whole picture. My guess is half of us know what it is before I even started talking, because it's just kind of, you've had the thoughts, you got that tug in your heart, but you've not done anything with it. And it's fear that holds us back. It holds us back from God's best. Now, there is a difference between fearlessness and bravery. Fearlessness is, you're not afraid of anything. That's dangerous. That's actually stupid, okay? You end up hurting yourself. You end up walking out in front of cars or off cliffs or whatever. Fearlessness is not a great way to live. People look at me because I do the outdoor adventure thing and I ride a motorcycle, and they're like, oh, you're fearless. I'm not fearless. When I was doing a lot of rock climbing, I was the guy that would take the long, easy routes with lots of ropes and clip off in a lot of places, because I didn't push myself very far physically. I wasn't in it to see how far I could push myself. I just wanted to be up on the rocks and out in nature, and I just loved it. But it wasn't, for me, it wasn't fearless. I'm like, clip. You know, I clipped. It was super safe. I was probably safer than walking around at my house, right? I'm not fearless. Anybody see these guys who jump off cliffs with parachutes and fly suits? Take a look at this. These guys are fearless. Take a look at this. So when I first saw that, I thought, that is so awesome. And then I started reading up on it. They all die. They do. They're adrenaline junkies, and they just chase the next rush and push it a little bit further until they run into a cliff or die. And so fearlessness doesn't really work for you, right? There's no real purpose in that other than getting an adrenaline rush. And you don't want to die chasing adrenaline. It's not a good place to be. But bravery is different. Bravery is pushing through your fear for a purpose that's bigger than you. And all of us are called to be brave. All of us are called. In fact, your life will begin to wither if you don't start pushing through some fears for a purpose. It is wired in to who you are and how God has made you. When I graduated from college, I had several friends. It was one of those God things. He brought together this group of about four friends, and we all separately kind of had this dream of starting a wilderness adventure ministry. And so we started praying about this. This was in 92. We started praying about it and kind of came up with a plan to move back to West Virginia. I was going to move back. Another guy from Wheeling, my friend Mike, was going to move back to Wheeling, and we were going to establish it, get it going, and then the others were going to come. And so I remember Mike and I moved back the summer of 94, got things established. It was April of 95, and I called the person who eventually became my wife, Christy. But at the time, we were not romantically involved in any way, shape, or form. But she was one of the people who was part of this group. And I called her, and I said, hey, Christy, we got it all set up. We're ready to go. Come on down. And on the other end of the phone, it was. And I was like, all right, what's going on? And she said, well, I got a really good job. I've got, benefits and health insurance and a retirement, making decent money. And things are really good at church, and things are really good right now. And I told her, I said, Christy, I'll never pressure you. I said, but we thought maybe we heard God in this, and I certainly, I'm not going to leverage the God said thing, but here's what I would ask you to do. Would you take a week and pray? And if God doesn't say anything, stay where you are. But if God says come, then don't disobey God. Do what he says. She called me 2 days later and said, I just turned in my 2 weeks notice. I'll be down in 3 weeks. She gave up a full-time job with benefits to come and work in a temporary jobs just around the community. She lived in the Young Life Leader in Bel Air. She lived in her closet, so every day she'd come out of the closet. And she was just, she walked away from what we're all looking for, right? That security and stability and all of that, because Jesus said so. And because of that, the trajectory of her life, the trajectory of my life, I've got my children today. I've got the best wife in the whole world today. Just everything that unfolded from there backs up to the fact that she was brave enough to step out and go for it. And it turned out to be a blessing. And I wouldn't tell you that it was easy the whole way along. It's not. We'll talk about that next week. But it was so God. And it was so good. And so much good has come from it. In June, we made the decision to stop doing the Saturday night service here. We had been doing a Saturday night service for 15 years. I started the Saturday night service 15 years ago. It was a successful Saturday night service. It was about a quarter of our church population came on Saturday night, and it was a really scary thing to make that decision. It was scary because I knew there were people who weren't going to like it. I knew there were people who weren't going to be able to come on Sunday morning. I had to sit down and have conversations with those guys, and that was hard. It was really hard. It was maybe one of the hardest decisions I've had to make, and at the same time, the easiest decision I had to make. And here's why. Because a couple years before, I was looking around at our staff and myself and a lot of our volunteers, and everybody was tired. Everybody was tired. And on the staff, there was just a disproportionate number of people who were sick. I'm like, what's going on? Like, we did a toxic building survey. We had an environmental company come in just to see if there was mold or some kind of chemical or something that was making us sick. It was that bad. And it was fine. The building's safe and everything's good. Now we know. And when I went on sabbatical 2 years ago, I was still asking that question, Lord, how do we do this in such a way that it brings life instead of wearing everybody out? And you know what he said? And it was over time, and it was in reading the scriptures, but basically, you guys are pretending to honor the Sabbath. You're pretending to honor the Sabbath. You take a half a day off on Friday, and you call that Sabbath. And the Sabbath isn't one of like the 613 Levitical laws. It's one of the 10 commandments. And you're defying the rhythms that I've set up. And until you begin to rest, and that half day, we just spent the time going to the DMV and taking the dog to the vet and getting the kids to the doctor and whatever else had to happen. And we were exhausted. Just jump in the next day. And you can run that way for a while, but you can't run that way forever. And so when I came back from sabbatical and was talking to the staff and talking to the board, it's like, this is a tough call. This is scary. But it was the right call. And so we stopped doing Saturday night. Now, I love being able to tell you 8 months later that in 18 years, I've never seen the staff so healthy. I've never seen our volunteers so healthy. We are in such a good place, such a vital place to be able to do what God has called us to do. But it was scary on the other side, right? The breakthrough comes on the other side of your brave. Being willing to step out of your comfort zone and sometimes do the hard thing. We're going to look at a story today of Jesus. This is a true story, happened on the Sea of Galilee, also known as Lake Gennesaret. It's in Galilee in Israel. Still there today. You can go and stand in the place where this event happened if you want to. Jesus is walking along the Sea of Galilee. He's talking with a crowd. He's teaching. He gets to this place. They believe they know where this is. It's like a little amphitheater spot right along the shore. He's talking. There's a crowd pressing in on him. And we'll pick up there in Luke chapter 5, verse 1. If you have your Bibles, you can open up. Otherwise, we'll put the words on the screen. And it says this: One day, as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, the people were crowding around him and listening to the word of God. He saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. So Jesus is teaching. He's getting pushed in on. People want to hear what he has to say. There's no amplification, right? So they don't have a sound system. So Jesus is talking, and the people were pushing in, and Jesus is like, he was right on the water, so he's getting backed into the water. So he gets into one of the boats, and he calls to one of the fishermen, a guy named Simon, who he ends up nicknaming Peter. Jesus was always nicknaming people, so he nicknamed this guy Peter, which means Rocky. And he says, Rocky, take me out just a little bit from shore so I don't get pushed into the water, right? And that's where we are. It says he got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, who he calls Rocky, and asked him to put out a little from shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. Now, there's something that's about to happen with Simon. Simon is about to do some brave things, but I want you to notice that there's a crowd there, that there are fishermen, his co-workers, everybody is there. There are people watching what is about to happen. And that is so important when it comes to being brave. Bravery oftentimes happens in front of people. Bravery oftentimes, most of the time, it happens in front of people, and it happens because of people. It happens because of people. We say it around here, all people need people. All people need people. And the question that I will ask you if I get face-to-face with you is, who are your people? Do you have a group of people who are on this spiritual journey with you? I don't mean your mama and your daddy, and I don't mean your high school friends. I mean, that's great if they're following Jesus and kind of on that spiritual journey with you, but who are your Christian friends that you're doing life with? Because if you don't have them, it's going to be really hard to find your brave. You know, in the realm of weight loss, Weight Watchers figured this out years ago. You know, what makes Weight Watchers work is people pay them $30 a month to come and get together with a group of people who hold them accountable, cheer them on. They weigh themselves in front of a room full of people. Who pays $30 to do that? I mean, but it works Because all people need people. You want to get something done in your life, you want to face a fear, you want to overcome something, you got to have people around you. This was so true in my life. When I was in high school, I was involved in Young Life, and we had a small Bible study that we got together with through the high school years. And we weren't perfect, we were kind of rowdy, but we were trying to follow Jesus. And that group of people, I found such courage and confidence, God's confidence, through that group of people. And that's the way God does things. It's always the way he does it. Jesus had a small group of people that he got together with. And they drew confidence from one another. But I drew the confidence. By the time I finished high school, I went to college, and I had the confidence to start a Bible study in my dorm room, and as a freshman. And so we had this group of people. We're getting together and studying and just doing life together and cheering one another on, praying for one another. And we looked around. I went to Shepherd College in the Eastern Panhandle of West Virginia. And at that point, in 1988, they didn't have an outdoor club. And it's like outdoor mecca. It's a beautiful spot. And so a couple freshman guys looked at each other, me being one of them, and said, hey, let's start an outdoor club. I wouldn't have had the confidence to do that as a freshman if I didn't have people around me, cheering me on, praying for me, going, you can do this. And so 30 years later, the Shepherd Outdoor Club still is going. We can still do anything. That was our motto. Shepherd Outdoor Club, we can do anything. But that gave me the confidence, because I had people, to apply for a job at a wilderness camp. And they typically hire people between 25 and 35 years old. I was 19. I applied, got the job. And that changed the direction of my life. I mean, I wouldn't be standing before you today had I not. You need people. All people need people. This is why groups are so very important. If you don't have a small group of Christians that you meet with regularly to share the joys of life with, to learn, to encourage one another, to hold one another accountable, to cheer one another on, you are missing out. Brave is going to be tough. You don't get brave on your own. I mean, every once in a while, but not really. Well, we go on with our narrative here. It says, when he had finished speaking, Jesus finishes speaking, he says to Simon, who's Peter, put out into the deep water and let down the nets for a catch. When God calls us out into the deep, it gets kind of scary, doesn't it? We kind of get freaked out. Now, Peter wasn't scared because he was going out into deep water, because he's a fisherman. He goes out into deep water in his boat all the time. The scary thing for Peter was that everybody knows that there are no fish out in the middle of the day on the Sea of Galilee. When the sun comes out and things heat up, the fish dive down, and you're not going to catch any fish, and you're going to look really silly as a professional fisherman throwing your nets out in front of all these people on the Sea of Galilee and not catch anything. It's like, you're going to make me look like a fool. When God calls us out into the deep, it does get scary, though. When I was a kid, this was back before the weenification of America, you know what I'm talking about? Like, we've eliminated everything fun because somebody might get hurt. When I was a kid, we had something at the swimming pool called the high dive. They've since removed the high dive. And so as a little kid, I just go off the low dive, jump, it's a lot of fun. And then at one point, somebody encouraged me to go up off the high dive. And maybe you had this experience. I remember it was a Wheeling Park. I remember climbing up the ladder and looking over to the side. And once you get past where the low dive is, it starts to get a little scary, right? I mean, you look down and you're like, that's concrete. I'm going to die. And you get to the top, and it feels like you're 60 feet in the air. You're not. You're 15 feet in the air, but it feels like it. And I remember my knees knocking, and I can remember this like it was yesterday. I can look down and see the concrete. Anyway, I worked my way out to the edge of the diving board, knees knocking, people behind me going, is he going to go? And I'm like, I don't think I'm going to go. And then I remember backing up because, it's only this, was probably, felt like it was only this wide. It was probably this wide. And I backed up and I held on to the post, and I'm like, I can't do it. But the people behind me were like, come on, you can do it, you can do it. And people from the ground were cheering me on. And I'm like, well, maybe I can do it. I don't know. And I made my way back out to the edge of the high dive. And I didn't hang my toes over. And I closed my eyes and I jumped. And I thought, well, if I die, I won't know. So And I jumped, and it was ugly, and I landed, but I survived, and it was fun, and I flew. Anybody ever fly? It's like, yeah, I was flying, and I landed in the water, and I was a different person on the other side of that jump. I know it sounds silly, but like, the low dive just didn't, there was no going back to the low dive now that I'd been off the high dive. And I think God wants to do that in some of our lives over the weeks to come. I think he's calling us out of our comfort zone. He's calling us out into the deep. And he wants us to face our fears and jump and see that he's good for it. And once you push through, there's no going back to the low dive. Life is different, and you're on an adventure. And I believe that every one of us was made for that. And so, yeah, but it's scary. You got to find you're brave. And honestly, we love familiar and comfortable, don't we? We do. But you're never going to grow by doing the things that you've already done over and over and over again. You're going to grow by doing new things. And this is a God thing. Read the Bible. God was always doing new things. He talks to Abram and says, you're going to launch a new nation. He talks to Noah and says, I want you to build an ark. Nobody knew what an ark was. Nobody had ever built an ark before. What's an ark? And they lived in the desert. It was kind of crazy. Jesus comes and starts a new covenant that changes the world. He sends out the 72 disciples 2 by 2 to new places to do new things, changes their lives. Even Deborah in the Old Testament, one of the judges, was the first woman, maybe in antiquity, to lead at a national level. God was always doing new things, always doing new things, and always breaking through as we face our fears and jump. Well, it says, Simon answered, Master, we've worked hard all night and we haven't caught anything. In other words, Simon's pushing back on Jesus here. He's going, Jesus, I'm the fisherman. You're the rabbi. I fish. You rabbi. Whatever that is. So, you teach. This isn't the way fishing works here on the Sea of Galilee. But then he says something so profound, and maybe the most profound 4 words in all of Scripture. He says, but because you say so, I will let down the nets. Jesus is asking him to do something unconventional. He's asking him to step outside of his comfort zone. He's asking him to take a risk on his reputation in front of other people. He's asking him to go for it. That is a powerful place to be with Jesus. When you can get to the place where you trust Jesus more than your fear and are able to say, because you say so, buckle up, big things are about to happen in your life. And there are times where he will call us to do unconventional things that stretch us. Are you willing to live a because you said so kind of life? I hope so. I hope so. But it's going to take some bravery. But it's where the best stuff in life happens. And your breakthrough is just beyond your brave. It says, when they had done so they threw the nets out. Simon Peter's like, all right. They caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and they filled both boats so full that they began to sink. So Peter throws the nets out because you said so. He gives a yank on those nets, and he's fully expecting just to pull them up and pull them into the boat and go, see, Jesus? And he pulls on those nets, and it's like, I think we might be stuck on the bottom. And he pulls some more, and finally he starts pulling them up, and the fish just start dumping into the boat at a rate that it's going to sink his boat, that his nets are tearing. He calls his partners. They come out with the other boat. They load the rest of the fish into that boat. It's going to sink both of the boats. This is a supernatural catch of fish. This is a catch of fish of biblical proportions. And they know it. They know this is a miracle. Those fish weren't supposed to be there. Those fish aren't there in the middle of the day. They had never caught a catch like that in the middle of the night, let alone in the middle of the day. Something big was going on. When Simon Peter saw this, it says, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord, I'm a sinful man." See, Peter understood that if Jesus could look through the water and see those fish, that he could look through his life into his heart and see the sin in his heart, and that he was dealing with somebody who was from God, and he wasn't okay with that. But the coolest part of all of that in this narrative is that Jesus doesn't allow Peter to run away, and he doesn't chase Peter off because there's sin in his heart. He invites Peter to join him in his mission. He says, "We're going to go fish for people." And Peter does. But it goes on, it says, "For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken, and so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners." Let me ask you this. When was the last time you were astonished by God? When was the last time you were astonished by God? I want you to live a life that is astonished by God, where you see him do more than you can do in and through your life, because you were made to live a life of adventure. You were made to step out of your comfort zone from time to time and trust God and see him come through for you, just like Peter did in this story. But it's only going to happen if you're brave. It's only going to happen if you're willing to get off the couch and say, "Jesus, because you say so. This doesn't make sense to me," or "this is scary to me," or "I don't know what's going to happen. This is kind of an unknown. But because you say so, I'm going to trust you more than I'm going to trust my fear, and I'm going to go for it." And as we live lives like that, you're going to see God do things in your life that will astonish you. Are you ready to be astonished? And better management won't bring breakthrough. More efficient processes, they're good, important, they won't bring breakthrough. Moral living doesn't bring breakthrough. All good things. But as we trust God and step out and do new things, breakthrough comes. Several years ago, anybody remember the SpaceX project? They came up with a $10 million prize if you could put a spaceship into space twice in 2 weeks. We, as a Vineyard Church, we actually accomplished that. I don't know if you know. Just kidding. Anyway, we don't do spaceships. But you know, NASA said, well, that's impossible. You know, I mean, they had the space shuttles, and it took months in between, and general consensus on the street was that can't be done. And the guy who actually did it, his name was Burt Rutan, said this, won the $10 million. Turns out it can be done. Said the day before something is truly a breakthrough, it's a crazy idea. So let me ask you this. What's your crazy idea? What's your heading? Maybe it's fixing a relationship. Maybe it's starting a business. Maybe it's working on your marriage or your relationship with your kids. Maybe it's answering God's call into ministry. Maybe it's starting a ministry. I don't know what it is for you. But here's what I want you to do this week. I want you to figure out what it is. And if God says nothing, you're off the hook, all right? But I want to challenge every one of us to take a little bit of time this week, maybe go to the park or find a quiet spot at home and say, God, I'm listening. Would you speak to me? What heading do you want me to go off? And maybe it's like I'm going to exercise for the next 6 weeks, or I'm going to build that into my life, or something like that. Or maybe it's something big, like I'm going to have a career change. I don't know. But pray, listen, and whatever he tells you to do it. Before you do, though, you got this card that's part of your program on the way in. And I want you to take this. This is our compass for the trip. I want you to write down whatever your heading is. Write it down. And then when you get lost along the way, or you run into a storm or something scary that's going to tempt you to quit, you can pull out the vision and go, oh, I'm heading that way, right? So bring these back next week. I want you to carry these with you. Put it in your wallet or your purse or your Bible or whatever you have with you all the time. And we're going to carry these with us for the next 6 weeks as we go. And some of you will carry this with you maybe for the rest of your life. As we set our heading find our direction, and then say, Jesus, because you said so. And the adventure begins. Let's pray. Lord, thank you so much that you didn't create us to just go through the motions. You didn't create us to stay on the low dive. You've called us to bigger things. And Lord, I thank you for every person here, every person watching online. God, you have a purpose and a plan for our lives, whether it be big or small in this season. I pray that you would speak. I pray, God, that we would hear you in the quiet of our hearts or in the still small voice in our minds or in something you show us around us, God, but that we would hear you and we would be willing to risk it. We would be willing to go out into the deep, that we would be willing to trust you. Because our breakthrough is beyond our fear. It's beyond our fear. So make us brave. In Jesus' name, amen.